Hi ladies, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nikki. I am a third-year homeschooling mom to 5 little boys. We are wrapping up our 3rd year of homeschool, and today's video is a good old-fashioned curriculum review. So I have a few curriculum reviews coming out over the next couple weeks. I know myself, as well as many other homeschool moms, are starting to search out curriculum and plan for the next school year, so I want to share those with you in the next couple weeks so that if you're interested in any of this curriculum or any of the curriculum that we have used that I can share my experience with, I want you to have that as a resource as you are choosing your curriculum for next year. So today's curriculum review is all about reading. If you are here for this review, let's go. So I'm gonna jump right into it. We're not gonna waste any time. This was my very first year using All About Reading as a reading curriculum. In years past, we have used Explode the Code and The Good and the Beautiful, both of which have a space in my homeschool, but this year I tried a different reading curriculum for one of my sons who is a struggling reader. This was his 1st grade year this past year, and we started with All About Reading Level 1. Last year, when I was researching different reading curriculums and different language arts curriculums, I was looking for something specifically to help my son who is a struggling reader. He has a speech delay, or he had a speech delay. Of course, that is something that he will continue to work on over the next few years. He did speech therapy for a few years and was dismissed from that program. So as I was researching curriculum for him, I came across All About Reading, and after watching some videos and reading some reviews, I was pretty much ready to try it. And the thing that sold me on trying this curriculum, actually there were 2 things. One, I listened to a podcast, I believe it was at the end of the summer last year, and it was by Sarah Mackenzie on her podcast, The Read Aloud Revival, and she actually interviewed the author of All About Reading, and the author's name is Maria Ripple. So Sarah interviews Marie, and she is talking about how she wrote All About Reading and why. And the why behind her writing this curriculum is really what spoke to me and what sold me on this curriculum. So she specifically wrote this curriculum to help her dyslexic son learn how to read. So while I do not have a child who is dyslexic, I do have a child who struggles to read in a traditional way. I had used the methods that I had used with my first son to teach him how to read, which was The Good and the Beautiful and Explode the Code, and that wasn't working for him, so I knew that I needed to try something else. And when I heard Marie talking about her curriculum, about All About Reading and how she wrote it, how she built it, and why, I knew that I had to give it a try. Now, this curriculum is not just for struggling readers. A lot of families use this as their one and only reading curriculum. I just hadn't heard of it or found it until just last year. Otherwise, I may have started with this from the very beginning, but now that I know about it, I can definitely see how and why families would use this as their one and only reading curriculum. So this is going to be a 2-part video. The first part is my review and my opinion of All About Reading Level 1. And then the second part is going to be showing you how I plan and prepare the curriculum to teach to my child. So first things first, this curriculum is a little bit pricey. This is definitely the most money that I have ever spent on purchasing a curriculum, but it is totally worth it. So this curriculum comes with a teacher's manual. You have a box with all of their words in it. These are like sight words, mastery words is what they call them. Reading review box is technically what it's called. And then you also receive 3 readers, which these are wonderful. I would purchase these just as a standalone. These are great readers for early beginning readers, whether or not you use this curriculum. And then the last piece is the student workbook, and it comes with activities in them. The whole book is filled with activities that go along with the curriculum that look like this. They are perforated and they tear out if you want to tear them out, or you can leave them in the workbook as is. So for my second video, I will show you how I prepared this curriculum to teach it throughout the year. But for now, we're gonna talk about what I think. Right off the bat, I love this curriculum. Highly, highly recommend it. So this is for any child who is learning how to read. I think that a lot of kindergartners use this level 1, but I think that it's definitely kindergarten to 1st grade level. My son used it as a 1st grader, and I think that it's definitely on par for standards as far as that goes. I love that everything is really, really laid out for you. The teacher's manual is very concise and very explicit in how to teach what you're teaching, why you're teaching what you're teaching, and it shows you step by step what to teach to the child, how you could even say it if you want to just read it from the book. In each lesson, they give you, the mom, the dad teacher, they give you a section to read beforehand to review what you're going to go over and how you're going to do it and why you're going to teach it this way. And then it goes every step of the way of how to do each lesson. Now, every lesson includes something hands-on, which is probably my favorite part. Every lesson comes with an activity, and then the lessons also include new words and phrases. And then it also, in the next lesson, will give you the words and phrases that you learned in the previous lesson. And then before you read a story out of the reader, it actually gives you a sheet with a lot of the words that your child will be reading in the story to kind of get them warmed up so they're not just jumping in with cold feet. And this is so important, and this made a huge difference for my son, because if your child is just beginning to read or is struggling reader, it is so helpful and less stressful for them to not have the pressure of like reading from a book and like struggling through the words or just not knowing how to read them, and giving them the opportunity to read it from a sheet like this first. I think that it helps take the pressure off of them a little bit, so that they are like, okay, I'm reading this on a sheet, but it's not the story, if that makes sense. For my son, it made a huge difference in his confidence when he went to go read the story. So every single lesson is actually different. They're not all the same every day. Of course, you will cycle through and you will do the same things, but you're not doing the same thing every single day. So for instance, the first day you may just have an activity sheet and some new words to go over, but that might be it. In some lessons, you will get introduced some of the words from your word box or some of the phonic sounds, and that's what you will practice that day. You will work on these, and then you will work on some of the words from the sheet. You may do an activity. And then some of the lessons are just reviewing some past words from previous lessons, doing an activity, and then reading one of the stories. So my son loved the stories in these books. Like I said, whether or not you decide to use this curriculum, these stories in these books are wonderful. They're very inclusive stories, and I really, really loved that about these readers. So typically, when you read a story, you have an activity that will pair with the story that your child is reading. And the activity isn't always necessarily a reading activity. It's really just to help them get engaged and connect with the story that they're going to read. It's not always practicing their reading. And that was something that was new for me. At first, I was like, why are we doing this? This doesn't really have anything to do with it. But afterward, after we did it a few times, I definitely saw the purpose of the activities that didn't necessarily have any reading involved, but it helped get them engaged into the story that they were reading, and then they would read the story, and you know, my son would say, oh, that's like the pie that we put together. That was his pie that he put together. Something along those lines. And it helps bridge that gap between reading the words and having a story and having it all kind of blend together. And again, this is really, really, really good stuff if you have a child who is struggling with reading. And whether or not you don't, it's just a really good skill to have. But I can definitely see, as a parent with a child that reading does not come easy to him, I can see how the author wrote this and why she did it that way. It definitely makes sense now. So the words that you have in the mastery, these are the review, I'm not sure what they call it, the word cards. They just call these word cards. I would call them, they're similar to sight words. They're not all just sight words, but there are some sight words in there. So these get added a few at a time as you go through the lesson. Level 1 has 53 lessons, and as you go through the lessons, you just get a few more of the word cards for your child to master, and then once they have mastered them, you just file them into the master portion of your filing system. And so what I found, and I know that this can be true across the board, is once he would master words, he would kind of forget them. And so what I started to do is, once we had a good chunk of words back here that he had mastered, I started taking a few at a time and just kind of recycling them back into his review section. And I found that there were some words that he had kind of forgotten, so it was good that we were kind of recycling them. So if I have one tip, that is something that I would definitely recommend doing. They don't really talk about doing that in the curriculum. They pretty much say, like, once your child has mastered it, just move it into the mastered section and kind of forget about it. I preferred to recycle through those words again once we had gotten a good chunk back there, and we just continued to do that as he went through all the lessons. So one thing that we didn't use a whole lot of was the phonics. So they have phonogram cards, and these are simply just letter sounds. So these are all the letter sounds, and this is why I think this can be used for kindergarten. So my son didn't really need those because he had already learned all of his letter sounds in kindergarten. At this point, we were strictly focusing on reading. Another just really fun thing for your child, and what my son loved, is, who doesn't love a little incentive? So in the curriculum, they have this sheet, and it is a progress chart. So every time they finish a lesson, they can put a little sticker on their progress chart, and then at the very end, after they finish it, they get a certificate that is included in your curriculum to say, hey, I did this. And that was really cool. My son loved being able to pick out his sticker to put it on his progress chart. And it may seem like something small, but it's like something visual for them to see, this is how much I've done, this is how much I have left to work on. And my son really liked that a lot. So as far as the curriculum as a whole, I think that it is beefy. I think that it includes all of the things that you need to teach your child how to read. I personally did add some things, which I will talk about here in a second, but one of my favorite things about this curriculum is that they recommend only working on reading with your child for 15 to 20 minutes a day. So if you don't get through the entire lesson in one day, that's okay. And they specifically tell you to spread it out over a few days. So as you can see, there's only 52 lessons, and this still took us the entire school year to go through. We did take a month off, and we ended at the end of April. So what often would happen is we would start the lesson, and I would say half of the time we would finish it in one day. But there are a lot of lessons where the lesson includes reading 2 stories, and when you are first teaching your child how to read, or if you have a struggling reader, reading 2 stories is a lot. It's hard work for them, and they can get exasperated very easily. So most of the lessons that included reading 2 stories, we always broke those up into a few days. We would spend one day reviewing his words, going over the words that would be coming up in the story, and then we would read that story. And then the next day we would review the words again on his sheet, and play the activity, and then do the other story. Sometimes a lesson would take us an entire week to get through, and that is okay. That is the beauty of this curriculum, is it is very self-paced, and while it's very concise and they tell you exactly how to do it and exactly what to do and why, you can pace it to fit your child's need, and I loved that. So there are lessons like this that had a lot of words, and if you have ever taught a child how to read, or if you have a struggling reader, this is like really overwhelming. And so we would not do this in one sitting. Like, I don't recommend asking your child to sit down and read all this, because this is a lot. And again, learning how to read is hard. It's really hard. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough, that this is not an easy thing to learn how to do. And so when they're learning to do this and they're in those beginning stages, it's hard work. Like, their brain is like really trying hard to like make this happen. So when we came across sheets like this, we would spend an entire week going through this. He would get overwhelmed, and I don't blame him for that. So what I would have him do is read just one group. If he could do one group, that was it. That's all that we did. You know, we would go through some of his word cards, but you know, as far as like the actual lesson part, I would only have him do one group at a time, because it's a lot. And I mean, there's more on the back of this sheet. So I would have him do like this, and then maybe one little group up here in like the phrases. And if your child can do more, do more. But I want to encourage you that if you do try this curriculum and you come across something like that and you're like, my kid's not gonna sit there and read that, my child wouldn't either. He would not do that. And he didn't want to. And I understood that once I really started to grasp, like, it's a lot of work to learn how to read. So a little tip is to just break that up and just keep this sheet out as you go through the rest of your lessons that week, and just keep revisiting it and just go through it as the week goes on. You don't have to have them read that whole thing in one sitting. So I want to show you just very quickly how the lesson is laid out in the teacher's manual, to show you how they lay it out for you and how wonderfully I feel that they have put this together. And it makes it super easy for you as the parent to teach this to your child. Here is an example of one lesson. So they tell you exactly up front what the child is learning about in this lesson. They tell you everything that you're going to need. And here are all of the things that they tell you about teaching these specific sounds, the way that they need to sound, and how to say them correctly. And then every lesson includes this before you begin. And again, this is where it really lays everything out for you. So every single lesson has this portion in it. And then here is where it tells you these are the things that you review. So this is where you review your phonogram cards, the word cards. And see right here it specifically says to choose just 10 word cards for review each day. So they really hammer in to not push your child to do too much. And then it goes into the lesson. So this is the teaching that tells you how to teach it, what to do. And this includes all of the letter tiles, which I will tell you about this in a second and what we did in lieu of using the letter tiles. And then like this lesson includes an activity sheet. So see, it tells you all of the words to help your child learn how to spell and sound out and read. And then here are new cards that are added in for this lesson. This is one of the fluency sheets that is included in your student workbook. It gives you ideas for other ways to teach these specific skills. Here's some more things for you as mom to help teach and why. And then they always recommend reading aloud with your child, whether you're reading aloud or your student is reading aloud or your child is reading aloud. They always have this in every lesson. And then, of course, to mark your progress on the progress chart. The lessons are laid out really, really nicely for you. It really doesn't leave room for having to figure anything else out. I love that it explains why you're doing it, how to do it. And so the other portion of this curriculum is the letter tiles. So they include all of these little tiny letter tiles that you could use if you had like a magnetic board. I think a whiteboard they would work on. You could even use them on a cookie sheet. But I have too many little kids and lots of little fingers, and I know that those letter tiles would be all over the place. So what they have done for people like me is they have an app, and the app is absolutely wonderful. So you can download it. I believe it may only work for an iPad. I'm not sure. I feel like it only works for Apple devices. It's 20 bucks and you buy it one time and you have it forever. And I'm pretty sure it works for all of the levels. It just depends, you know, you just can go to whatever level that you need. And so that's what makes it really wonderful is you can easily toggle between what level you're on. You can choose what lesson you're working on, and your child can, you know, spell the words out on the app. We really liked using the app, so I highly recommend getting the app. It also helps in a non-pandemic world when you could be out on the go, schooling on the go, at the park, at the playground, at the coffee shop. It makes it easy to teach this curriculum anywhere, because then you're not having to like carry all of these things with you. You can easily use the app instead of having to have all these extra things with you. So with that being said, did it work? And yes, it absolutely worked. So my son at the beginning of the school year was, I would say, at a mid-level kindergarten level reading as far as like standards go. I am not one to cling to like public school standards as like the goalpost. I really focus on my own individual children and their own progression. And so, but for the purposes of this video, I want to give you a guideline of kind of like where he started and where he is now. And so as far as like public school standards, he was a little behind. And to date, he has progressed so much. I'm like honestly amazed at him. So like I said, his biggest hang up is that he has a past speech delay that he is still working on. He no longer requires speech therapy, but it definitely plays a role in his ability to learn how to read, because there are specific sounds that he still has to think really hard about before he can read them. And so it's not that he cannot say them, but that decoding aspect of reading, he is just now starting to get there. It's just now starting to click. And in comparison to like my other son, that kind of started to click for him the middle of his first grade year. And for my my second son, who used All About Reading, it's just now starting to click where he can decode words a lot faster. And I 100% credit that to this program. So the way that I kind of tweaked this program is I added to it. So when I felt that he really was getting a solid base on reading, this year we did no language arts. We were only focusing on just reading. So we were just doing reading. Near the end of the school year, he was about 45 lessons into All About Reading. I started adding in more of his sight word work and Explode the Code again. And it was at that point that he definitely seemed ready to be able to do those things. So I started using the Dolce sight words for him. And so he has learned the pre-primer, the primer, and he is finishing up the first grade list, just to give you an idea of like what he has been able to do to kind of go alongside the All About Reading curriculum. And then we also started, it was around lesson 45-ish, you know, kind of like near the end, like a good chunk he had already done. I added in Explode the Code again. So he did Explode the Code for kindergarten, and he was able to get through it, but it just seemed like something wasn't quite clicking for him. So that's when All About Reading kind of came in and really built a solid foundation for his phonics mastery and blending of words. Like that is really what he had to work on this year. And All About Reading did that for him. And we added Explode the Code back into his daily rhythm. He did that usually 3 times a week, and he started on book 3, and it seemed like to be the perfect match with doing a little bit of All About Reading, doing a page or 2 out of Explode the Code. He would flip through some of his sight words, and that was his reading for the day. And all of those things combined, it seems like that has really been like the golden, like we have found the perfect match for him. Now, this curriculum doesn't need anything extra. I simply added in some extra things because I felt that he was ready for it, but you don't need to do that. This curriculum can stand alone. You don't need to have anything extra, and that is why I really, really love it. So with that being said, I have nothing but wonderful things to say about this curriculum. It is well planned out. It has all of the mastery work and the core things that you need to teach your child how to read. It has wonderful readers. Teacher's Manual is just a really great and wonderful guide to teach your child how to read. And the hands-on activities, we had so much fun with those. And I really enjoyed them. I really loved this curriculum. It was an absolute gift to our homeschool this year, and it really and truly helped my son build a solid foundation in his reading. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big old thumbs up, and you can subscribe for more reviews coming up soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
The world could fall down, it's gonna be